Bureau mobilized its agents from the Asian branch office in order to assess the current situation in Japan. A helicopter set off from the safe zone and eventually entered Tokyo's airspace. A senior agent from the Hunter Bureau, who had risked his life and volunteered for this trip, looked out of the vehicle's window and clicked his tongue. How tragic. The current status of Tokyo was far worse than he had imagined. The city itself was completely destroyed after the dungeon break occurred. Buildings no longer possessed their former appearances, cars folded and crumpled like bits of paper, street lamps bent at their waists, burning flames, rising smoke, scorched remains, and unidentifiable structures turning into ash. Surely, the word tragic was invented just for a sight as wretched as this one. The agent's forehead unconsciously creased up. If someone were to ask him in the future if he had seen hell, then yes, he could now say that he indeed have seen one. The giants have been eating humans, you see. Those beastards are acting as if to erase all traces of Japanese people from Japan itself. They destroy all the buildings, eat humans, and they even pull out trees from the streets, too. These giant-type monsters that came out of the Rank S gate displayed a certain difference in behavior from other monsters. While other monsters concentrated on killing humans, this batch of monsters was actively trying to destroy everything they could see. Only the destroyed remains of the civilization were left behind in these creatures' wake. That thing over there. Cold sweat poured out of the American agent as he began calling out to Jesus. The Japanese Association employee helped him to stand back up. So, you saw it. Oh, over there. There's a giant over there. Yes, there is one giant still remaining here. No, rather than calling it remaining, should I say that it's not budging from the spot, instead. The employee's gaze shifted outside the window. The American agent wiped the cold sweat off his brows and cautiously looked in the same direction as well. A massive monster, bigger and taller than any monster this agent had ever seen, stood proudly in the downtown area of the utterly devastated city of Tokyo. That is the giant-type monster. The helicopter began flying closer according to the employee's instructions. The agent hurriedly inquired as his face paled instantly. Will it be fine to get this close to that thing? The American definitely heard this before coming on this trip. All giant monsters have left Tokyo now, which meant that the abandoned city was as safe as it could get under the circumstances. But then, wasn't this way too different from that declaration? The Japanese Association employee calmly explained the situation with a tone of voice indicating that there was nothing to worry about. It'll be fine. As long as we stay in the altitude that the creature's hands can't reach and we don't attack first, we'll be 100% safe. This has been confirmed through multiple observation efforts, so you can rest easy. The American agent swallowed his saliva. Confirmed through multiple observations, is it? Observation. The Japanese employee spoke of that word as if it didn't mean much, but just how many people had to be sacrificed at the hands of that giant monster in order to come to that conclusion? Just thinking about those unlucky few who flew too close to the reach of the giant sent an eerie shiver down the agent's spine. In any case, it was highly valuable information for this agent who was tasked with compiling data on the Rank S monsters, as well as to report on Japan's current status back to HQ. When I look at that thing, I don't really get the feeling that the creature is truly alive, you see. Yes, it's obviously breathing in and out, and can move around because it's alive, but well, should I say that it's like looking at a machine that only acts according to how it was programmed? A machine, is it? Quite regretfully, the agent couldn't agree with that assessment. The imposing figure of the giant monster when looked at from up close was, in a word, overwhelming. He belatedly raised his camera up and recorded the creature in great detail. The reason for the viewfinder shaking ever so slightly like that was probably not entirely due to the helicopter busily buzzing around in the air. How many giants came out from that gate? A total of 31. Excluding the boss rank, the rest have evenly dispersed throughout the countryside. And how many have been killed so far? Only 2. Which means, with the exception of the boss over here, there are 28 giants destroying Japan as we speak. Well, there aren't any hunters left to fight against the giants, you see. Everyone's been preoccupied with escaping at the moment. On the day the dungeon break happened, hunters participating in the crucial battle to buy the residents of Tokyo enough time to evacuate were all killed. They were able to kill 2 monsters in the process, but they had no other methods left to stop the remaining 28 from spreading out to the rest of the country. This here was the reason why the Japanese Association employee said yes without resistance to the request for assistance from the Hunter Bureau when he should have been far too busy trying to put out the fire burning on his foot, no, make that on his entire body. A car rolled to a stop right behind Jinwoo, and its window silently rolled down next. Are you SungJinwoo Hunter Nim? Jinwoo heard that unfamiliar voice and turned around to see who it was without thinking too much about it. However, his brows rose up slightly after he confirmed who it was. I apologize for coming to see you without prior communication. But if it's alright with you, can we speak in private? A small suspicion brushed past Jinwoo's brain just then. Seong Hunter Nim. Jinwoo had been patiently waiting until then and replied calmly as well. Yes. Yu Myung-han pulled out a check from his inner pocket, issued under his name by a bank that often had dealings with Yujin Construction. However, this check was somewhat different from a normal one, where there should have been numerical letters denoting the value of money represented by this slip of paper. There were none to be found. Here, he pushed such a check forward. Jinwoo looked at this blank check for a little while before raising his head back up again. Yu Myung-han continued on with some difficulty. I'm not some arrogant fool who thinks he can buy anything with money, especially even more so when I'm dealing with a rank S hunter such as yourself. I'd greatly appreciate it if you consider this as nothing more than a small gesture of my sincerity. Chairman Yu's eyes were burning in a determined light. Jinwoo could now guess the reason for him choosing this venue to hold this conversation. The things to be discussed from now on could not be leaked outside of these walls. That was why. This isn't about me joining his guild or something like that. That was why the chairman had chosen his own territory that he could control 100% unless some kind of a natural disaster was to befall them. Jinwoo had always been quick on the uptake. That was why he simply asked this question. Chairman, just what is it that you wish to buy from me? Yu Myung-han spoke frankly about his current situation. Actually, I also suffer from the exact same illness as your mother, Hunter Nim. That completely unexpected reply took Jinwoo by surprise and he froze up momentarily. Does Jinho know? Yu Myung-han shook his head. Aside from my personal physician, only 3 others know of my condition. Myself, my wife, and my secretary. And now, it's 4. Indeed. Jinwoo nodded his head. Only now did he understand why Chairman Yu didn't bother to go through Yu Jinho, and instead contacted him secretly like this. Yu Myung-han wanted to hide his own illness from the rest of his family. But then again, his shoulders are carrying the fate of several tens of thousands of employees, aren't they? If the rumor of the day is that Chairman Yu could freely move about being numbered got out, then it didn't take a genius to see what might happen to Yujin Construction as well as its subsidiaries in the near future. I have been scouring the world for a cure, a method, to rid myself of this illness for a while. In the process, I was able to discover that a single patient has gained her freedom from this dastardly illness. As Jinwoo expected, the conversation was heading down the path he thought it might. I don't think it a coincidence that the sole patient recovering from the illness happens to be your mother, Seong Hunter Nim. Jinwoo had left many in sheer shock and astonishment with his never-before-seen mysterious abilities. Could he have somehow cured his mother's illness with his strange but wonderful abilities? Chairman Yu had used various avenues to investigate Jinwoo, which meant that him arriving at such a deduction wasn't so far-fetched at all. Jinwoo didn't deny nor agree with the claim and quietly stared at Chairman Yu. The latter swallowed his saliva. I cannot afford to make a mistake here. If the talk so far was nothing more than a practice match, an appetizer, then the real game was about to kick off now. This was the most important moment. Yu Myung-han let out a deep but short breath and spoke up with some conviction. What I'd like to earn from you is the truth, Hunter Nim. He then pushed the check forward a little bit more with his hand. And as your compensation, this is just merely a small part of what I'm willing to provide you with, Seong Hunter Nim. Not everything, but merely a part, he said, meaning he was prepared to hand over something else besides money if that's what Jinwoo wanted. If you help me out on this matter, Hunter Nim, I shall never forget this favor for the rest of my life. The tiger of the financial world lowered his head and asked for help. If those people who knew Chairman Yu saw this spectacle, they would have cried out in sheer shock just then. After a short deliberation later, Jinwoo finally opened his tightly shut mouth. I'm sorry. That one short sentence caused Yu Myung-han's eyes to tremble quite powerfully. It is unfortunate, but that's not something I can help you with. In that case, as his hopes riding on this talk had been far too great, Chairman Yu couldn't easily accept his defeat here. How did your mother become cured, Seong Hunter Nim? Chairman, Jinwoo's expression became rather serious. The surrounding air began to grow chilly all of a sudden. That was enough to remind Chairman Yu just what kind of a person he was dealing with right now. Jinwoo continued on. Hypothetically speaking, if I knew how the illness had been cured and I wished to get rich from that, why would I have kept my mouth shut until now? I see. Chairman Yu no longer clung on to Jinwoo. Well, in that case, the older man saw that Jinwoo was getting up to leave, so he also got up in haste and summoned Secretary Kim. The latter guarding the door quickly entered the office chair. The moment he took his first step inside, he immediately read the frozen atmosphere flowing between Jinwoo and Chairman Yu. This meeting was the final ray of hope for his boss, so even Kim's complexion darkened rather quickly. Hunter Nim wishes to return. Please take him back to his residence. No, I'll be fine. Thank you. Jinwoo tactfully declined the offer, and after leaving short goodbyes to both Yu Myung-han and Secretary Kim, he climbed aboard the elevator all alone. The lift moved at a frightening pace from the penthouse floor right down to the lobby. He hadn't noticed it while riding it with someone else, but now that he was alone, he could tell for sure this elevator was simply far too large and wide for only one person to ride in. Jinwoo spat out a long sigh. Phew, he didn't feel so well after rejecting the request. Wasn't that man the father of someone he treated like a little brother? He could have extended his helping hand while pretending to be defeated by his emotions. However, I don't know him. He didn't know just what kind of a man Chairman Yu Myung-han was. He didn't know whether he was really suffering from the illness or he was scheming something else. The divine water of life used to cure his mother might possess an otherworldly healing property, but its supply was also limited. And that was why he simply had to be more circumspect with their usages. The terms put forward by Chairman Yu indeed had been incredibly tempting, but in the end, they failed to change Jinwoo's mind. This was the end result. Jinwoo continued on and crossed the lobby, but then his steps came to a halt after he heard a voice coming from somewhere. Jinwoo's head shifted in the direction of that sound. The giant TV in the lobby that had been switched off earlier was now showing the real-time footage of the situation in Japan. It was the breaking news regarding the dungeon break and the massive calamity spreading at an alarming rate. Jinwoo walked to the front of the TV. The sight of the ruined city captured from the TV station's helicopter was truly gut-wrenching. The giant monsters were demolishing the buildings. Those unfortunate citizens failing to evacuate in time were captured and immediately thrown into the mouths of these giants. What little remained of armed forces poured out all their firepower, but that proved to be a useless endeavor. It was still impossible to kill monsters without the powers of hunters, after all. Although it was impossible to accurately calculate the death toll, the rough estimate had come out to well over 1 million. In a word, it was an unspeakable tragedy. Jinwoo's expression hardened. This would be his first time seeing the current status with his own eyes. And so, as the fourth day dawned on this tragedy, the association president Go Gun-Hui, having decided that now was the right time, stepped in front of the crowd of reporters. Go Gun-Hui swept his gaze over the tightly packed wall of reporters as well as the cameras pointing at him and quietly opened his mouth to speak. I express my condolences at the tragedy unfolding in Japan. And also, I'd like to reveal the position of South Korea's own Hunters Association. And also, a little earlier in the day, the American Hunter Bureau also released a statement as well. We're currently gathering hunters to one location. Was America finally revealing her hand in order to save Japan? However, it's not for Japan's sake. This is the image of the gate discovered earlier today in eastern Maryland. The size of the gate was not normal. It was smaller than the one in Japan, but still, its sheer scale was uncommonly massive. According to the measurement taken by our investigative team, this gate is also a rank S, exactly like the one that has appeared in Japan. This nation's top hunters will focus all their efforts in closing this gate instead. When this horrifying piece of news finally made its way over to Japan, the Japanese people desperately praying for the Americans' aid all cried out in despair. Japan was finished. In this situation, Korea finally broke her silence over the matter and clarified her position as well. Go Gun-Hui stood in front of the reporters and spoke up. We will not get involved in Japan's matters. A day before the press conference, just like any other day, the wide-open office space of the Jin Guild was occupied by only two people, Jinwoo and Yu Jin-ho. Hey, Jin-ho. Yes, Hyung-nim. Should I go over to Japan for a while? Excuse me. Yu Jin-ho's expression hardened. Of course, he hadn't forgotten just who was saying those words. He had seen Hyung-nim's amazing feats closer than anyone else out there. However, common sense simply didn't apply to rank S gates. Abruptly, his head shifted over to the computer screen Jinwoo was looking at. It was filled with the breaking news regarding Japan. Hyung-nim was worried about them. Unlike Yu Jin-ho, Hyung-nim possessed incredible powers. It was quite obvious that he'd also suffer from the distress that the responsibility of his power level brought along. Yu Jin-ho vacated his spot and hurriedly extracted a photo album from the file cabinet before bringing it over. When he flipped that thick book open, all sorts of newspaper articles were clipped onto its pages. What's this? All of them were articles related to Jinwoo. From the incident of the Red Gate, which the media still didn't know that Jinwoo was a part of, to the raid of Jeju Island, when he solved the issue of the traffic jam, and even when he took care of the strange, unidentifiable stone statues alongside the Hunters Guild recently, too. Do you know what the common theme among these articles is? Hyungnim. I wonder. It's that I'm nowhere to be found in all of them. Hyungnim. If you're planning to go to Japan, please take me along with you. Jinwoo was baffled here. He expected Yoo Jin-ho to either stop him or cheer him on when he said he'd be heading over to Japan. But never did he imagine the kid would say take me with you. However, Yoo Jin-ho was being dead serious. You haven't forgotten where I want to go, right? Even if Yoo Jin-ho was a naive, immature kid, he surely would have heard about what was happening in Japan. That place was currently a true hell on earth. Demons called giants were judging mankind in the most gruesome manner imaginable. Even then, Yoo Jin-ho nodded his head with a determined expression on his face. As long as you're unhurt, Hyungnim, I'll be alright as well. If you get hurt somehow, I don't want to even think about that. Yoo Jin-ho looked back with a strong light of trust burning in his eyes. The feeling you'd get from someone trusting you to such an extent certainly couldn't be described as bad in any shape or form. I was only joking, you know. Why would ever I go to Japan when times are like this? Jinwoo stood up from his spot. Hey, that's enough for today. Let's just go home. You worked hard anyway. You're going home already, Hyungnim. Jinwoo stepped outside the office door while waving his hands. Yoo Jin-ho bowed his waist deeply to send him off. Jinwoo stepped into his house. A truly mouth-watering savory scent of stew tickled his nostrils. He stood on the spot and soaked in the evening's smell. This is so good. One of the great things about Mom being discharged from the hospital was that now he had someone to welcome him back home every day. The dark and quiet home of the past no longer existed in his life. Not anymore. Son, you're home. He heard his mother's voice coming from the kitchen. Will you eat dinner? Yes. What about Jin-ah, though? She says she's got no appetite. Jinwoo's hand suddenly stopped before it finished pulling out his chair. Even now, she couldn't get a wink of sleep last night. She only fell asleep not too long ago. Jinwoo hid his presence and cautiously opened the door to his sister's room. Jin-ah was rolling around in her bed, struggling to fall into a deeper slumber. She normally maintained such a bright appearance, but it seemed that she hadn't gotten over her mental trauma yet. Then again, she had to go through such an experience, didn't she? His rage towards monsters boiled over whenever he saw how much his sister was struggling like this. Why were those things endlessly tormenting humanity? This is the decision of the Hunters Association, and ours alone. We won't stop any individual hunters from doing what they wish to do. What was he even talking about now? Like animals lazily waking up from their winter hibernation, the reporters, still frozen in shock, began slowly exchanging glances with each other again. There is one such person. There is one hunter who wishes to go to Japan and get rid of the giant monsters. Who could that be? Who wanted to head to Japan under the current situation all by himself? The bottomed-out atmosphere of the press conference venue suddenly began boiling over. Just who is this hunter? The attention of everyone present in the venue was directed to Go Gun Huey. He took his time for a moment or two, before pressing his lips as close to the mic as possible. It's SungJinwoo Hunter Nim. That one sentence caused hundreds of cameras to explode in a wall of blinding flashes. Rank S hunters possessing American citizenship had begun gathering in the most luxurious hotel in the state of Maryland by the time news broke from South Korea, and indeed, they all got to hear it. Most of them had received a boost to their abilities through the power of upgrader Madame Selner. It wouldn't be much of a stretch of one's imagination to call this gathering as the world's greatest armed force. It hasn't been long since his reawakening, and he's already drunk with his own powers. That idiot. Maybe he thinks fighting some measly bugs is the same as fighting against giant monsters. A hunter who overestimates his ability will die 100% of the time. Who knew that the fame he got from killing the ants would end up shortening his life? How ironic. All these people had seen Jinwoo's brilliant performance in Jeju Island. The power SungJinwoo possessed was certainly quite strong. However, the race of giants was a whole different ball game. Ants pushed forward with their overwhelming advantage in numbers, and that was why his ability to summon out countless creatures worked so well against them. Even if he was physically strong, could he be able to fight alone against the giant monsters, each one of them powerful enough to appear as bosses of the hardest difficulty dungeons found in the Ranka Gates? These American hunters jokingly began making bets. I bet my yacht on him getting killed in less than one day. I bet my mansion on 2 days. Well then, it was then. Will that really happen, I wonder? Thomas Andre, quietly dining all by himself in the corner, lowered his utensils and opened his mouth. He was one of the 5 special authority rank hunters in existence. Strong Awakened continued to appear after the Kamish subjugation operation had ended. But none were able to exceed the levels of those hunters who managed to survive the worst crisis to go down in the history of mankind. When such a man formed a smirk, everyone else ceased their useless banter right away. I shall bet the Scavenger Guild on him surviving till the end. He leisurely scanned the other hunters from beneath his sunglasses and left the restaurant. That man, he just knows how to ruin the atmosphere, doesn't he? This ain't the first time that Freak did this anyway. It's better to just forget about him, man. Incheon International Airport. Hold on. We're passing through. Jinwoo parted the sea of people blocking his path and walked forward in an imposing manner. The determination oozing out of his expression was serious enough to shame the top movie star about to make his grand appearance in the climactic battle scene. We're passing through. Jinwoo carved out a path, and Jinwoo wordlessly followed behind. Click, 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 click. Reporters continued to click away with their cameras, afraid that they might miss even a second of Jinwoo. Quite unlike Jinwoo, who was quite clearly excited about the trip. He remained calm and collected, though. Japan had sent a private plane once they heard the news of Jinwoo wanting to go there. And of course, all entry procedures had been wavered away as well. The soldiers shook their heads helplessly. We simply don't have the space to carry every patient you have. At a push, we can only accommodate 3-4 more. The old lady addressed the soldiers. But that can't be. We have over 10 patients who suffer from mobility issues. The old doctor nodded his head in agreement. Regardless, the young soldiers from the JSDF stomped their feet in anxiety. Now isn't the time to worry about those people who might die any second, anyway. Giants are heading this way as we speak. The young JSDF soldier, his face caked with sweat, got angry and shouted out. The old doctor looked down at the floor for a moment or two before raising his head up. I can't abandon my patients. My wife and I have promised that we'll stay by the sides of our patients until the end. The doctor's voice carried his strong determination. A young soldier of the JSDF slung the rifle over his shoulder. I am a soldier, sir. I can't run away by myself knowing that there are citizens remaining here. It was then. The ground began quaking all on their own. Isn't that? As the young soldier took aim, his sight spotted something off. The giant was currently biting on his comrade that had set off a little earlier. The eyes of the young soldier reddened in an instant. The soldier fired his rifle at the approaching giant. Unfortunately, the weapons of modern civilization couldn't harm these monsters. The giant easily brushed off the hail of bullets and arrived before the young soldier in the blink of an eye. The ammo-less rifle could only spit out empty coughs and nothing else. More tears formed in the eyes of the young soldier. Oh, dear God, please. The giant monster raised its head to swallow the human it was gnawing on, before leaping towards the young soldier. It was right at that moment. A massive naga slammed into the side of the giant monster without warning. The giant naga responsible for flinging it away stood before the growling monster. It was none other than Jima, previously the boss-level monster of the naga species that were inducted into the Shadow Army not too long ago. Jima reached his right hand out next to him. When he did, a black spear slowly rose up from the shadow on the ground. Jima powerfully grasped the spear and aimed the weapon at his front. One could sense his unbreakable will to not let anything pass by him. The young soldier from the JSDF couldn't quite figure out whether the spectacle unfolding before his eyes was a dream or reality. To think, a monster was protecting him from another monster right now. He thought he'd end up inside the giant monster's mouth for sure. But, having taken a look at the wide, imposing back of the other monster, he felt several powerful emotions welling up from deep within his heart. Jinwoo looked at the young soldier next and saw his scared eyes. He walked past the soldier and lightly patted the scared, tearful Japanese man on the shoulder. The gesture meant to say that the soldier had done excellent work. What he did, standing off against a monster all by himself with just a single rifle, was not something any regular person could even try to imitate. Jinwoo had entered many dungeons as a Ranky himself, so he knew better than anyone just how courageous this soldier had been. Jinwoo jumped up straight and powerfully swung down the Demon King's short sword. The blade, overflowing with the magical energy oozing out from the black heart, vertically split the face of the giant monster in one slice. Like a tree that got hacked by an axe, the monster slowly tipped over backwards, not even able to scream out properly. Dear viewers at home, it's hard to believe, but the scene before me is truly happening. The reporter riding on the helicopter continuously spat out gasps of astonishment as if he could hardly believe his own eyes. The camera began transmitting the scenes below. "Oh my God," as the reporter cried out in sheer astonishment over and over again. The ants successfully brought the giants down. They then began chomping down with their sharp mandibles and ate the corpses. Of course, under Baru's orders, they didn't forget to leave some part of the monsters behind so more shadow soldiers could be created later. As for those ants that got too greedy for their own good, swift kicks from Baru flew in to sort out the situation immediately. The reporter was shouting out in a clearly excited voice now. "The giants are being devoured right now. These giants are being devoured by the insects right now." These giants that instilled unbridled shock and fear with the actions of devouring humans were in turn getting devoured by the ants. The Japanese people watching this scene felt a certain sense of inexplicable gratification. That was perhaps the reason why the most amount of interest was focused on the ant army, since Jinwoo himself refused to be filmed from the get-go. She must have graduated from elementary school not too long ago. This young girl was running away screaming with a tear-strewn face. Right behind her, a giant gave chase with a disgusting smile on its face. How far could she go when running on her still short legs? The distance between them closed up in an instant. The giant must have found this game of tag with a certain winner set in stone rather amusing to play, because it continued to form a toothy grin. It reached out with its arm that was at least 1.5 times longer than other giants. And, just before such a rough hand got to snatch the young girl up, a cold flash streaked past the monster's wrist, and the blue-colored lightning that exploded out afterwards began burning up the cut surface of the now missing wrist with extreme heat. The giant shot up to its feet and screamed out in pain as it held its wrist. The owner of the blue-colored blade was none other than Igris. He spun around and lifted up the pale-faced girl that was on her knees shivering, before quickly evacuating from that place. The giant angrily glared below. The creature that had cleanly severed its wrist was busy escaping with its prey. The eyes of the enraged giant were quickly dyed and red. The scene was scary enough for any observers to wet their pants. But even then, someone still stood before such a terrifying monster. It was, of course, Iron. His armor had become even more enhanced after his grade rose up to Elite Knight. Iron stabbed the shield down on the ground and stood proudly with his chest wide open. And then, a truly loud roar exploded out from beneath his helm. The glare of the giant previously aimed at Igris was instantly switched over to Iron. As if to say, "Come if you dare," Iron pounded on his chest vigorously. The fist of the enraged giant mercilessly punched down on Iron. However, Iron was not forced back an inch. The effects of his grade rising up had pushed him to a whole new plateau of power. Can you see this, everyone? These summons, these creatures summoned by Hunter SungJinwoo, are raiding the giant by themselves. Could this truly be reality? This very reporter didn't believe Yuri Orlov's claims from the word go, and quite obviously, he also didn't hold much hope with Jinwoo as well. But then, not just SungJinwoo himself, but even the summoned creatures he ordered to go out on their own were speedily hunting down these giants, as if they were nothing. Maybe, just maybe. Then the reporter thought that, just maybe, SungJinwoo could possibly save this country all by himself. Something warm and powerful gushed up from the deepest part of his chest. When he first saw Jinwoo at the airport, his entire body was overcome with goosebumps of nasty shock. How could this be? This man was strong. Matsumoto had been the association president for many years, and he got to meet many powerful beings up until now. That was how he could tell from just one glance. He stood next to countless hunters in his life so far, but hadn't encountered many situations where the hair on the back of his neck stood up straight from the unbelievable chill he felt. No, actually, this would be his first time. If only he had a chance to meet Jinwoo just once before the Jeju Island raid took place, he'd have immediately rescinded the plan to drive the Korean hunters to their demise. The words of Goto Ryuji from back then, when he personally met Jinwoo, were definitely not wrong. Please, I beg of you to focus on defending us, with Osaka as the center. The Japanese Hunters Association wanted Jinwoo to focus solely on defense and buy them enough time so that they could negotiate with either the Americans or with the Russians. Too bad, that plan was immediately thrown out the window with one short sentence from the man in question. I refuse. Jinwoo curtly stated his position. It was only obvious that the association president Matsumoto Shija and all the other association-related parties would jump up in sheer fluster. Did he suddenly have a change of heart and no longer wanted to kill the monsters? Matsumoto could only ask with a tightening chest. Then, what will you do instead? Instead of a verbal reply, Jinwoo answered with his actions. He separated his summons into 3 parties and had them operate on their own, while he too began moving by himself as well. But even then, Matsumoto Shija was swallowing his worried gasps over something else entirely. Is he really trying to fight against all of the giants? Every hunter in the world had all said in one voice that such a feat was impossible. But was he trying to do precisely that? The city of Nagoya, it's been successfully taken back. What was that? Matsumoto Shija shot up from his chair from that shocking news. It hadn't been all that long since Hunter SungJinwoo had set off, yet the giant-type monster in Nagoya had been brought down already. Even before the Japanese Association president had a chance to calm his fluttering heart, messages began pouring in from all corners of the country. A giant's corpse has been discovered in the city of Nakatsugawa. The city of Shizuoka has been successfully reclaimed. The cities of Takayama and Nagano both have been. Hunter SungJinwoo and his summoned creatures were eliminating the giant-type monsters scattered throughout the country of Japan as they closed in towards Tokyo. It was truly an unbelievable speed of advancement. Jinwoo and his summons starting from Osaka and moving eastward, while killing every giant they ran into, finally arrived on the doorsteps of the city of Tokyo. For some reason, though, Tokyo that no longer resembled a city came across as a somewhat familiar sight to him. Where have I seen this before? Jinwoo combed his memories for a little while before finding his answer. The demon's castle. The site of the ruined, crumbling cities he saw back then resembled Tokyo's current appearance. The only difference being, there were no flames burning right now. When his thoughts arrived at this point, a dark shadow crept up over his expression. Could it be? From the very first floor of the demon's castle, all the way up to its final floor, every city found within the dungeon was destroyed almost beyond recognition. If that was the system's way of giving away hints, then what was the so-called architect trying to tell him? Jinwoo smirked to himself. Does it really matter now? The so-called architect, the manager of the system, was dead and gone inside a dungeon. Seeing that there was no further contact after that, the chances of that guy still being alive were slim, to say the least. And, even if what I saw back then was the prediction of the coming events, I shall stop them. That was why he continued to grow stronger. He chased after greater strength, because he didn't want to be toyed around with by powers he couldn't fight against. Raise his level, get his hands on new skills, and raise his level up even higher. And eventually, he had arrived at this point in time. Igris' elite soldier army was the first to arrive in Tokyo. Fang's High Orc army was the next to arrive. Igris discovered the approaching High Orc army and lightly nodded his head as his greeting to their chieftain. The corners of Fang's lips, hidden under his black hood, arched up as he too nodded his head. The elite soldiers' army, the division of ice bears that acted alongside them, and the High Orc army had now gathered in one spot. And a short while later, the sounds of marching footsteps uniformly resounded out in the surrounding air. Just beyond the ash-gray fog, a large-sized battalion of shadow soldiers approached the location. As befitting of the soldiers that had taken the longest route but also hunted down the most giants, Baru and his ant army were the last to arrive. Just like before, Igris sent out a greeting first. However, Baru didn't display any hint of acknowledgement and walked right past Igris, strode up to Jinwoo's back before kneeling down on one knee in a dignified manner. "Ah, you all have arrived." Only then did Jinwoo tear his eyes away from the distant giant to take a look behind him. "Everyone, you all did well." As he welcomed them all, every shadow soldier followed after Baru's example and knelt down on one knee. Ice bears couldn't physically kneel down, so they simply prostrated, their noses pressed to the ground below. Everyone, including the elite soldiers, ice bears, ants, high orcs, and nagas, as well as other types of shadow soldiers he had recruited in between. Nearly 1,000 of his shadow soldiers had gathered in one spot. Jinwoo just barely managed to swallow his dry saliva and cautiously took a look behind him. There was a lone giant standing over yonder. The size of this giant-type monster was on another scale altogether compared to the others he saw during his trip to this place. Simply by staring at the head of a giant so far up in the sky, he couldn't tell whether he was looking at an actual monster or a high-rise building. Instead, wowzers, a gasp of shock leaked out from his mouth. There was just too great a difference between seeing it from a video clip and with his own 2 eyes like this. "Get to a safe distance." "Yes, Hyung-nim." Jinwoo nodded his head with a determined face and quickly ran in between the shadow soldiers to get away from there. "Good." Jinwoo patiently waited for the kid to get to a safe enough distance away, and then summoned up his newly added family members. "Come out." Although not as huge as the boss-level giant, several massive shadow soldiers rose up from the ground, from number 1 up to number 13. Jinwoo named his giant shadow soldiers number 1 to number 13, according to the order of who got extracted first. He felt rather pleased from the sight of these massive figures standing in front of his shadow army, which made his entire troop seem even more dependable than before. This should be enough. Jinwoo figured that this was enough preparation and raised his hand. As his fingertips pointed to the heavens above, all of the shadow soldiers got ready to attack. Advance. Baru raised his head up high and screeched loudly. Ants, ice bears, giants, no, almost every single shadow soldier gathered there dashed forward all at once towards the boss-level giant monster. The fierce march of the shadow army rocked the ground below. The earth shook and mighty dust storm kicked up. And soon, Jinwoo's soldiers entered the territory of the giant. It happened then. The surrounding air suddenly transformed. What the hell? A scream-like cry of shock exploded out from Jinwoo's mouth. The boss giant had disappeared from his view, and when it reappeared, already half of his shadow soldiers had been annihilated. It did a sliding tackle. There was no other fitting term to describe the boss giant sweeping away his soldiers with its stretched leg other than a sliding tackle. It was an unfathomable destructive power. With that single attack, a huge entity that was the Shadow Army got split in half. Of course, his soldiers weren't simply standing back to get massacred out there, either. Even before the dust kicked up from the giant's foot had settled down, Fangs finished gigantifying himself and stood before the monster's face. He then sucked in a deep, deep breath as his chest expanded greatly. A nonsensically massive pillar of flames erupted out from his mouth. This attack from Fangs was capable of even melting down those monsters with innate resistance to fire in a single breath. Unfortunately, the giant blocked this blazing inferno with the palm of its hand. Jinwoo could sense Fangs getting astonished by what was happening. While still in the lowered position, the giant snatched up the ankle of a giant shadow soldier in the vicinity. His giant soldier, as big as a regular building, resembled a small child after it got caught by the hand of the boss-level monster. And this creature threw the giant soldier straight at Fangs. 1,000 against 1. The proper battle between his shadow soldiers and the boss-level giant truly began. No, this was a far too one-sided display of violence to be called a battle. Shadow soldiers were crushed constantly and endlessly by the giant's attacks. A punch, a slap, an elbow drop, a knee, the back of the foot, and the bottom of it. One movement from the boss-level giant, and dozens of soldiers were swept away. The boss-level giant's flashy movements easily exceeded that of the highest-ranked melee-type hunter's speed. Baru watched the ant army being trampled on and was about to dash forward. But Jinwoo raised his arm and stopped him. Not yet. Baru took a step back. Both Baru and Igris standing next to Jinwoo and waiting for his orders displayed visible hints of wanting to join the battle. However, now isn't the time yet. Jinwoo's lips were shut tight in a straight line. The soldiers repeatedly went through destruction and revival, resulting in his MP decreasing at an alarming rate. In fact, the rate was so severe that even the massive reserve of MP he possessed now thanks to the Black Heart wouldn't be able to keep up. However, Jinwoo remained patient and didn't move. He calmly observed the giant from the distance. He sent out his immortal army as bait and searched for the creature's weaknesses. That was his plan for this raid. Within this desolate wasteland that once used to be the center of Tokyo, Jinwoo's irises were gleaming brightly from his frightening level of concentration. As I thought, as expected, no attacks could damage the hardy skin of the giant as it had worn its enormous magic energy around itself like an impregnable carapace. The creature must have been aware of its own defensive capability, because it didn't even bother to defend itself and continued to pour out one attack after another. However, there was one single exception. There was one moment that the giant chose defense instead of offense. That would be when Fangs spat out the fire dragon's breath in the face of the giant before. Only then did it raise its arm to protect its face. If, by chance, that was not a simple coincidence, then Kaisel. Jinwoo summoned out his sky dragon. Kaisel emerged out from the shadow at once and spread out its massive wings in a spectacular fashion. Jinwoo quickly climbed aboard Kaisel's back. Baru, Igris. Baru's wings extended out from Jinwoo's call, while Igris climbed up behind his sovereign. Soon, Kaisel flapped its wings and took off while carrying his two new passengers. The ground quickly grew further away. Let's go. The four of them flew up high in the air and flew in a straight line towards the giant monster's head. It was then the eyes of the giant shifted to its side. Even though it was in the middle of a violent tangle with nearly 1,000 shadow soldiers, it still had time to discover Kaisel and Baru approaching it at an ultra-high speed. The boss twisted its body around. Jinwoo's vision caught the sight of the creature's massive shoulders moving. Evade it. Jinwoo and Igris kicked away from the back of Kaisel. A blink of an eye later, kaboom. Jinwoo watched Kaisel explode into black smoke, his brows quivering. It was still a rotten feeling to watch his soldiers get destroyed like that. If there was one saving grace, then that would be the fact that the target for his anger was right in front of his face. Igris was the first to attack. He jumped high up in the air and swung the Demon King's longsword down. A blue streak of lightning crackling into life from the end of the sword rained down on the giant's face. The boss rapidly tilted its head back to evade the lightning. Did it again. Once more, it dodged an attack aimed at its face. Jinwoo was now sure of where its weak point was. He immediately used ruler's authority to reel himself in closer to the giant's face. Baru followed closely behind. Demon King's short sword. Jinwoo tightly grasped the two short swords suddenly appearing in his hands. Baru's claws had been extended to full in no time, as well. The combined assault of Jinwoo and Baru unfolded in the sky high up above. The shadow soldiers on the ground succeeded in fully reviving themselves, took aim at the giant's ankles, and pounced on their targets. Bolts of lightning crackled and stormed down, pillars of flames erupted forth, and giants continued to bite and tear. Yu Jinho watched this hallucination-like battle from beginning till end without missing a beat. He was completely at a loss for words. This was no longer a battle between a hunter and a monster. No, it was a fight between a monster and another monster. The monster the size of a high-rise building, and Hyun Nim commanding nearly 1,000 summons all at once. If someone asked Yu Jinho who was even more monster-like in this picture, he thought that he wouldn't be able to answer right away. Truly, it was truly a lamentable thing that he was the only one witnessing this battle. Yu Jinho did his absolute best to calm his heart, that was ready to explode in his chest, and kept his eyes firmly locked on Jinwoo's position. That was also the moment when Jinwoo's short sword stabbed deeply into the eye of the giant. The boss rocked its head violently from side to side and desperately rampaged around. However, Jinwoo wasn't flung away from his spot despite all the shaking. It's working. He grasped tight the short sword digging into the eye of the monster and activated a skill with his other hand. Violent slash. This particular eye of the giant was soon torn to shreds. The monster contorted its upper torso and resisted. But still, Jinwoo remained impossible to shake off. While he tenaciously clung onto the giant's eye, he took a look behind him. Baru, your wish is my command. Baru understood immediately what his sovereign wanted and flew in at an unbelievable speed to enter the hole in the giant's eye. On the outside, Jinwoo, while from the inside, Baru. The combined attacks from the two began ripping apart the giant face from inside and outside simultaneously. The giant monster's mouth shot wide open as it issued a soundless scream. Just as the huge monster stopped attacking for a moment, ants focused their efforts on the creature's ankle and finally succeeded in their goal. After losing a tendon in one of the legs, the giant powerlessly crashed down on one knee. The ground couldn't deal with the massive collapsing weight and quaked quite viciously. Even then, Jinwoo and Baru's combined assault continued on. Its humongous body slowly began tipping to the side. And finally, the giant's truly huge body came crashing to the ground. It was then Jinwoo heard the familiar mechanical beeps going off in his head. Jinwoo's clenched fist gripped even harder. I did it. Jinwoo lightly landed back on the ground and was about to sigh out in relief, but then, he realized something was amiss and stopped his movements altogether. Hold up. Jinwoo hurriedly brought the message windows back up. He didn't even have time to enjoy the notices of his level going up 4 times in a row, as his eyes were currently fixed to the very first message. Oh my god. Jinwoo's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. This wasn't the boss monster. His shocked gaze shifted over to the giant sagged on the ground, with no focus to be found within its dull eyes. The incredible power that was on another realm compared to other giants, and the overwhelming aura that even left Jinwoo surprised. No matter what, this creature looked, sounded, and smelled like a boss, yet it was apparently not. The system's message clearly said that this thing was a regular monster. It was then he heard the overexcited voice of Yu Jinho coming from a distance. Jinwoo raised his hand quickly to signal the sparkly-eyed Yu Jinho running over here that he should stop right there. It was unknown whether he was a good listener, or maybe he was just scared easily. But regardless, the kid froze up right in his tracks. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's glare became even more serious than before. The message hadn't appeared yet, which could only mean that this raid was far from over. That wasn't the only suspicious thing here, either. It was impossible to perform shadow extraction on this massive monster, as well. He couldn't see any black smoke rising up from the corpse, a telltale sign of it being a candidate for the extraction. The jaw of the giant was suddenly moving again. Jinwoo reflexively got into a battle stance. Fortunately, the voice coming from the giant's mouth turned out to be a familiar one. "Oh, my king. It is I, Baru." The former ant king managed to extricate itself and stepped out, before displaying the appropriate courtesy towards Jinwoo. "It's only you." Jinwoo lowered his vigilance. After Baru entered the giant's body, his presence got hidden by the huge monster's near-bottomless magical energy, and as a result, it became momentarily impossible to differentiate him. After confirming that it was Baru for real, Jinwoo returned his short swords back to his storage. Jinwoo was about to heartily praise his underling with a smile, but his expression crumpled in an instant. What the hell is up with this stink? A truly disgusting odor was getting stronger as Baru got nearer. Jinwoo was about to pat his ant soldier on the shoulder as a gesture of a job well done, but discovered a yellowish liquid of unidentifiable nature there, and sneakily withdrew his hand. "You did well, Baru. I thank thee, O my king." Suddenly, the air all around him trembled. Sensing yet another change taking place, Jinwoo hurriedly raised his guard up. A powerful gust of wind assaulted them right afterwards. Jinwoo's forehead creased up. The stormy winds, violent enough to rip out trees, roots and all, swept all around him, but then they abruptly slithered off to somewhere else. The commotion died down almost instantly. What he mistakenly thought as storm winds was simply the horrifyingly disgusting and bottomless magic energy the dead giant possessed. That massive amount of magical energy clawed and swept everything in the vicinity away as it moved entirely elsewhere. "What about Yu Jinho?" Jinwoo hurriedly turned to look behind where Yu Jinho had been. Thankfully, the kid was unscathed due to Igris shielding him. Jinwoo sighed in relief. Now that he found more leeway to search his vicinity, Jinwoo quickly snapped his head in the direction where that vast magic energy had disappeared to. It was deep within the gate. Every single drop of the magical energy the dead giant possessed was sucked into the gate. It was as if the gate itself had swallowed up that magic energy. The black barrier blocking the gate had shattered a long time ago during the dungeon break. The interior of the gate, which was the inside of the dungeon, could be seen clearly from the outside. Something else is in there. His perception stat was telling him as much. Jinwoo stared at the interior of the dungeon, his eyes progressively getting narrower and narrower. Whatever was waiting for him in there, the moment that he recognized its presence, the hair on the back of his neck all stood right up. This might get very dangerous. Jinwoo looked at Yu Jinho and spoke in a heavy voice. "You stay here and wait for me." "Yes, Hyung Nim." Yu Jinho nodded without raising a fuss. His desire to follow was quite strong, but at the same time, he figured that he'd be more of a hindrance than anything else. Jinwoo left the kid on standby outside, and led his shadow soldiers into the mouth of the gate, entering into the dungeon itself. This is really... While entering a few top-ranked dungeons, he thought that he got pretty used to the idea of things being massive by now. However, his thoughts had to be revised the moment he entered this particular dungeon. Way too huge. Jinwoo walked within the passage that seemed so limitlessly tall and wide. It was as if the word massive had been invented just to describe this place, and he continued to swallow back his gasps of astonishment. He still didn't make any noises inside the dungeon, though. He continued to maintain this habit formed during the time when he was a lowest-ranked hunter and lacked any means to protect himself from the monsters, even though he greatly exceeded the levels of regular rank S awakened by now. It was never a bad thing to remain cautious of one's surroundings, after all. "Can you hear it?" Baru concentrated on the ambient noises for a little bit, before nodding his head. "Yes, I can hear it, my king." Baru could also hear it now. Just over yonder was the end of the dungeon. From the location where the dungeon's boss should usually be, laughter came out from there. It was so soft that only the beings on the levels of Jinwoo or Baru could perceive it. The good-natured laughter of a man continued to resound out as if he was genuinely pleased about something. Jinwoo couldn't help but get puzzled here. Even though the darkness of the dungeon had masked them and they couldn't see each other, the other party must have felt Jinwoo's approach by now. Even then, it can still laugh like that. The spectacle of so many monsters enveloped in black smoke advancing forward in unison was more than enough to instill fear in the hearts of every enemy watching. However, such a thing wasn't applicable to a certain man, whose entire body was tied down by chains, with the sole exception of his head. Was it him simply being tied down? No, it wasn't as simple as that at all. The black chains connected to the walls of the dungeons not only wrapped tightly around this unknown man several times, some of them even pierced straight through his body, the emerging ends seemingly taking root within his flesh. It was such a wretched sight that anyone watching would immediately start wondering, if that was punishment, then just how big was the crime committed to warrant such treatment? Jinwoo furrowed his brows. On the other hand, the man formed a bright smile while looking at Jinwoo as if he had run into a very close friend. Oh, how humorous this is. So very humorous. All of you detestable ruler beastards, take a good look at who had come to see me first. Jinwoo came to a stop, not too far but not too close. The man quickly carried on. The chains. Hurry and undo these chains. I know all the plans of the rulers. I need to let the other sovereigns know of the true. The man's words suddenly came to a halt, then. His eyes, filled with joy only until a moment ago, had cooled down in an instant as if it had all been a lie. This unknown man quietly peered into Jinwoo's eyes. While that was happening, the latter also carefully studied the former, and it was in that moment he realized that this man's face and that of the supermassive giant guarding the gate were exactly the same. You are not the one that I know of. Jinwoo had no idea who this guy mistook him for, but he wasn't planning to deny that, either. Well, he also had never seen the face of this tied-up man before. Excluding the dead giant outside, of course. Jinwoo threw a question. Did those rulers or whatever make you look like this? They are trying to use me as the stepping stone for laying the foundation of the true warfare about to take place. This was the first time something like this happened. Jinwoo had tried to initiate conversations with intelligent monsters up until now, but none of them were able to explain their origins at all. But then, the one right in front of his eyes had revealed the reason for its existence for the first time ever. It said, to lay the foundation of the true warfare. Whether those words were truth or lies, Jinwoo realized that they could become an important clue to unraveling everything. Just what are these things called rulers? Ancient enemies of the sovereigns. Sovereigns? The angel statue back then began to go berserk as it was being pushed to the corner. It cried out something about other sovereigns not taking this lying down. For the time being, even if he were to set aside what kind of existence these sovereigns were, he kind of realized just where one of them could be right now. In that case, the reason why those beings tied you up like this is that. That's right, the man replied with sorrowful eyes. I am also a sovereign. And then, he explained further with a desperate voice. It is quite likely that both the sovereigns and rulers are aiming for you right now. However, you lack the strength to fight against them. In order to stand a chance against them, you'll be needing influence, too. Out of all the hard-to-fathom words being spewed out, Jinwoo still managed to catch what this man wanted to say the most. Influence. The man nodded his head. Release me from my seal. I shall aid you. Jinwoo could only doubt his own hearing just then. Who wanted to help who now? A monster helping a human. He was so flabbergasted that he ended up blurting out what was on his mind. You seriously think I'll believe you? The unknown man formed a serious expression. Then, I shall make you believe me. He began chanting some kind of a spell as his lips moved at an incredible speed that looked like a video playback sped up tens, no, hundreds of times. At that moment, Jinwoo sensed the magical energy present within this empty, open arena suddenly coagulate around this man. In the blink of an eye, he summoned his short swords out. If the gathering magic energy carried even a hint of aggression, then the blade of his weapon would have pierced into the man's forehead already. However, Jinwoo patiently waited. The amount of magic energy being utilized was very small when compared to the reserves both Jinwoo and the man possessed, and he couldn't sense any aggression or hostile intent from the gathered energy, either. Jinwoo readied the ultimate version of the skill dagger throw, dagger rush, and waited with bated breaths. The needle-like tension continued to prick him in his skin. Eventually, the strange language flowing out of the man's mouth came to an end, and a system message popped up in Jinwoo's view along with the familiar TTI ring. What attracted Jinwoo's attention, first of all, was not the contents of the man's suggestion, but the title denoting what the man's true identity was. The King of Giants, is it? He remembered the giant-type monsters he hunted down on his way to here. Most likely, there must be some kind of a connection between this revelation and the reason for the face of the supermassive giant protecting the gate being the same as this man's own mug. As Jinwoo fell into a contemplative silence, the man patiently waited for an answer. What should I do? Jinwoo looked at the blinking YN and pondered his options. Seeing that the system even bothered to give him an alert like this, the effects of this skill or whatever must have been for certain. He needed to think about who'd be in more of a disadvantage when unable to lie to the other party here. However, there was no reason to think too deeply about this as the conclusion was already clear in his mind. A system message appearing simultaneously with the mechanical beep quickly informed him of the successful completion of the negotiation. The King of Giants urgently repeated what he said before as if he was waiting for Jinwoo to accept the pledge. Please, free me from this seal. I shall help you. Jinwoo's eyes went extra round from surprise. His voice didn't want to come out of his mouth, as if his throat had been blocked off. A smile crept up on the face of this king of giants after seeing Jinwoo's struggles. That's right. That is the power of the pledge of trust. Indeed, the effect had been confirmed to be real. Half out of curiosity and the other half out of testing purposes, Jinwoo was about to answer, "I shall completely trust you. Let me undo those chains right away." But he really couldn't say any of those words at all. So, this is the pledge of trust at work. Jinwoo confirmed the effects of this skill and felt his heart beat faster. How come it's possible to converse freely with you, unlike how it is with other monsters? Monsters, creatures emerging out from the gates. You must be referring to the denizens of the chaos world. The king of giants cracked a mocking grin. "I shall ask you something in return. How could you even think of placing mere denizens of the chaos world on the same pedestal as a sovereign who rules over them?" He then formed a dignified expression truly fitting for a king. "All the denizens of the chaos world emerging from the so-called gates are, without exception, remnants of the defeated army. They have lost the battles against the army of the rulers and become captives. They had to remain tied to a leash for an uncountable number of years, so it's only obvious that their ego has been eroded somewhat. However, I am the king. I am different from them. I have patiently waited for the fated day when I can make my escape from their grasp." The king formed a thin smile next. "And that's how I got to encounter you." Jinwoo worked hard to keep his emotions in check and to analyze what this guy was saying as objectively as possible. If he's really in existence on a higher realm than other monsters, then he might really find himself with some important clues here. He had a ton of stuff he wanted to ask right now. But before he did that, he needed to confirm something else first. "By any chance, when you said the army of the rulers, were you talking about those wearing silver armor with wings on their backs?" "That's right. Those dogs are the soldiers of the rulers." As expected, it felt as if another puzzle piece had clicked into its rightful place. He suddenly thought that the video playback the angel statue showed him was not some make-believe crap, but someone's real memories of an event that did happen. Instead, just what the hell was going on in this world, then? Jinwoo asked another question. "Why do those beastards called rulers keep sending these monsters to us?" The reason for the existences of the gates. If he could find out the reason why these gates kept popping up, then couldn't he be able to do something about it and stop that from happening again? Jinwoo's biggest concern lay with that. "I have told you that already, have I not?" The king of the giants spoke with much more emphasis in his voice. "They are preparing for war. They will change this world into a suitable battlefield to engage the sovereigns in yet another warfare." "I don't quite follow you here. Just by sending monsters to Earth, this planet suddenly becomes a war zone." Well, it was true that sometimes, a situation far more horrifying than a war zone could develop from a gate, but still, Jinwoo momentarily recalled the event that took place in Jin-Ah's school. Even then, those were matters that involved humanity. He just couldn't see how those would serve as preparations for some kind of a war involving non-human races. "It is all to inject magical energy into your world." Thud. Jinwoo felt as if he was struck in the back of his head just then. If monsters were calamities emerging from the gates, then magic energy was the blessing coming from the gates. Not just the hunters, but many civilians thought similarly along these lines. Magic crystals, as well as mana stones. These items containing magic energy were treated as the greatest source of energy in the modern world. But then, that energy was actually nothing more than footholds for the upcoming war. The king of giants continued on with his explanations. "There is simply no better way to propagate the type of energy that didn't exist before than by sacrificing the blood of those that possess the necessary energy. So, the rulers decided to utilize the captives they had in their possession. There was no need to even mention that the density of the magical energy around the world was gradually getting thicker every day. That was not a naturally occurring phenomenon. No, more than likely that was the fruits from the trees first germinated from the fertile field cultivated from the blood of the monsters. The magic energy fortifies a world. They planned to fortify your world so it wouldn't get destroyed from the impacts of the warfare. In that case, this warfare is yet another blood-soaked struggle between the sovereigns and the rulers. Not too long from now, the world you're living in will become a true hell. A battle between the armies of the rulers and the monsters, no, creatures before they were unwittingly turned into monsters. There isn't a lot of time left. Once the truth about you coming in contact with me gets out, both the sovereigns and the rulers will not simply stay back and watch on anymore. It is even likely that the envoys of the rulers have begun their schemes already. You've been implying that those beastards will be aiming for my life, but why is that? You really don't know anything, do you?" The kings continued on with his explanations in a tone of voice thickly laden with pity. The power that you possess actually is not yours. The mere fact of that power now residing within you could only mean that the original owner had betrayed other sovereigns. When Jinwoo heard that, he remembered the angel statue saying something similar in nature. It was likely that the statue was also one of the denizens of the chaos world that followed the sovereigns. You have become the enemy of both the sovereigns as well as the rulers. However, only I pledge that I shall stand by your side and fight for you. So, will you not help me? The King of Giants had assessed that this much convincing was enough and formed a serious, determined face. Unfortunately for him, Jinwoo calmly asked the question in return. If you wish to stand by my side, then wouldn't it be simpler for me to turn you into a shadow soldier instead? The King of the Giants flinched in surprise. It was only for a second then, but for that briefest of moments, the king saw the actual face of the shadow sovereign and this human's overlap. What the human said was not wrong. To him, there would be bigger merit in having one more absolutely loyal underling than forming a brand new alliance with a complete stranger. The king inwardly admired the fact that this human didn't miss that crucial point. He spoke up and explained the situation. We, the sovereigns, as well as the rulers, are made up of spiritual bodies. Once such a spiritual body dies, it is destroyed and can't be turned into one of your shadow soldiers. Meaning, I can never become your soldier. Are those enough reasons for you to help me now? Jinwoo wordlessly stared at the king. This being titled the King of Giants, it was carrying an expression of certainty as if it knew that the restraints tying it down would soon be undone. Of course, Jinwoo had no such weird tendencies of feeling jealous after seeing someone else being happier than him. Also, this guy said he'd become his ally out of its own volition, so he didn't have any reason to reject the offer either. However, why did he keep feeling this uneasiness in his heart? I've definitely overlooked something here. One cold sweat drop after another began forming on his forehead. The King of Giants, meanwhile, made another plea. Unshackle me, I beseech you. Jinwoo took in a deep, deep breath. No matter how hard he pondered his options, he couldn't think of a reason to reject this king's plea. The longer he thought about what he had missed, the more he felt as if he was getting sucked into a quagmire. Am I being too paranoid here? Jinwoo approached the King of Giants while carrying the Demon King's short sword. And as he walked right up to its own nose, the king nodded his head. Jinwoo reciprocated that nod. He swung his short sword laden with his magic power, and one of the chains powerlessly snapped in half. His heart was beating louder and louder for some reason. Slice. The second chain was cut in half as well. The King of Giants formed a reverential expression that was neither joyous or sorrowful, and waited for his restraints to be undone. The third chain. Slice. Jinwoo leaned towards the back of the king in order to cut the chains taking root within its flesh there. You have said that you will stand by my side. Yes, of course I will. If you help me, then I shall help you in return. This is a fair and absolute transaction between two sovereigns. In that case, are you on the side of the humans? The king suddenly became silent. The pledge of truth. The condition of this spell meant that the King of Giants couldn't say anything. Jinwoo took a look behind this being's neck. A jet black mana crystal embedded on the back of his neck coldly reflected the ambient light. As long as that item was stuck in the body, this being would hear the voices of the rulers in his head, too. The words of kill every human. For a brief moment there, a murderous intent flowed in the air. With its now free right hand, the King of Giants took aim at Jinwoo's temple. Too bad, it was still not enough to reach him. He lowered his head and evaded the attack, before stabbing the short sword into the king's chest. Stab. As if the chains wrapped around its body didn't even exist, the sharp blade dug deep into the chest cavity of the captive king. The King of Giants suddenly vomited out a mouthful of blood. However, that single hit wasn't enough. Letting this thing live was far too risky. This thing could become an untold calamity. Jinwoo analyzed the situation as thus, and while evading the right hand of the king constantly attacking him with nothing more than tilting his upper body this way and that, continued to thrust the short sword into the chest of his enemy. Stab, 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 stab. He stabbed for the 6th time. Only after his blade entered and left the chest cavity for the 6th time did the King of Giants stop moving his right hand. It was over. Jinwoo extracted his short sword for the last time. The King of Giants stared straight into his eyes and formed a meaningful grin. It is regretful, but this here is the end of the road for me. Jinwoo took a step back and wordlessly shook the blood off his short sword. In the meantime, the king continued to speak. As the battles between the residents of your world and the captured denizens of the chaos world become more and more intense, this world will transform further and further into a battlefield. The king coughed out another mouthful of blood and formed the last smile. I pray that everything you wish to protect burn into ashes in the all-ending conflagration of the war. That ain't gonna happen. Jinwoo curtly cut off the words of the king, and swung his short sword hard to cut the being's head off. The moment the king drew his last breath, the ocean-like magical energy sleeping within the creature exploded into the world outside. The transformation of the world had begun. A few days before the death of the King of Giants, a helicopter belonging to America's Hunter Bureau landed on the lawn of a certain ultra-luxurious mansion. The owner of this mansion, currently enjoying a belated lunch, stared at that helicopter through his window and stopped cutting into the juicy slab of steak. This could get troublesome. The owner of this grand mansion was one of the only 5 greatest hunters alive on this planet. His name was Christopher Reed. He was more commonly known as the Special Authority Rank Hunter rather than by his birth name, though. In any case, who'd dare to trouble such a person? It's been a long time, Deputy Director. And Christopher Reed's gaze shifted over to the African-American lady standing behind the Deputy Director of the Hunter Bureau, Madam Selner. The Deputy Director was carrying a deeply tense face as he scanned his surroundings. He spoke while anxiously rubbing his chin. "We have an urgent matter to discuss with you, so can you send everyone else away for the time being?" As Christopher Reed had expected, his prediction of being troubled had come true. If his guest was only the Deputy Director, then he'd have made the latter wait for a few hours as the price for disrupting his peaceful afternoon without a heads up. However, he couldn't do something so impolite with Madam Selner present. He beckoned the steward with his finger. Only after his employee got close enough to touch his forehead did the hunter whisper his next order. "Until my 2 guests leave, do not let anyone come anywhere remotely close to this room." "Understood, sir." "What business brings you two to this distant abode of mine?" Madam Selner searched for a sign of assurance from the Deputy Director first. He nodded his head to signal go ahead. But, just before Selner could open her mouth to speak, Christopher Reed raised his hand first. "If you have come here to speak to me about that rank S gate appearing somewhere out in the east, then let me make myself clear. I'm still not interested in going." He resolutely stated his case. He made sure to drive the point home so there would be no room for anyone to try changing his mind. "I haven't come to you because of that gate, Mr. Chris. We have an even bigger problem than that to worry about." Madam Selner hesitated greatly before she forced her lips to open. "Mr. Chris, in the near future, there is a strong possibility that you'll get assassinated by an unknown assailant." At that moment, an awkward silence descended on the room. Madam Selner, his voice as he called out to her became heavy, low. "I'll never forget the favor you did for me for the rest of my life." Because of her ability, his powers had become stronger than ever before. He had exceeded his limit that felt like a wall he couldn't overcome no matter what. However, that didn't mean she was allowed to look down on him like this. Just who is supposed to assassinate who here? Just who would dare to touch even a single hair on the body of a special authority rank hunter? A cat could never slay a lion. Only a lion could rip apart another lion to death. "Not too long ago, I had a dream related to you." "A dream?" "Yes." Madam nodded her head. Christopher Reed felt flabbergasted. But Madam continued on regardless. "In my dream, you were surrounded by some men. And they..." "Look here, Madam Selner." Christopher Reed couldn't hold back anymore and yelled out loudly. "Just because of some dream you had, you flew all the way out to this place to tell me this nonsense, Madam. This is not nonsense, and I merely wish to. I already know full well what you used to do before becoming an awakened, okay? Some people believe that, because she used to work as a psychic, Madam Selner came to possess a unique ability that separated her from all the other awakened out there. However, her former profession still couldn't excuse this utterly nonsensical drivel." Christopher Reed's expression crumpled rather unsightly. "I am a special authority rank hunter. No one can kill me. But, in my dream, you definitely. You and your dream again." Christopher Reed spat out a long sigh and then nodded his head. "All right, fine. Let's say I believe you, Madam. Let's say there are enemies powerful enough to kill me. In that case, if that is all real, who should I go and ask for help, then? Should he call the cops, or request protection from the Hunter Bureau against an opponent capable enough to supposedly kill a special authority rank hunter? What a stupid notion that was." Christopher Reed snorted in derision and continued on. "If true, there's nothing that can be done, is there?" Madam Selner silently deliberated for a long time before making her reply. "There might be someone who can help you." "And just who might this someone be?" "Hunter SungJinwoo. If it's him, he might be able to protect you." SungJinwoo. "Wait, are you talking about that Asian hunter who went off to solve the Japanese dungeon break crisis?" "That's correct. He's Hunter SungJinwoo." The King of Giants lost its head. Jinwoo quickly stepped away to evade the fountain of blood gushing out from the severed neck. It was then the familiar mechanical beep went off in his head. "What the heck?" Jinwoo was flustered for a moment there as he had never come across a situation like this one before. And a little while later, mechanical beeps continuously rang inside his head. And at the same time, Jinwoo got to spectate on the grand feast of system messages utterly filling up his vision. Jinwoo's eyes opened progressively wider and wider. Jinwoo confirmed his new level and swallowed back a huge gasp of shock. His level reached 100 after hunting down all the ants on Jeju Island. However, his level stayed pretty much the same for a little while after that, probably because of the wide gap between him and the monsters he ran into. After asking for other major guilds' understandings, he got to sweep clean every single high-ranking dungeon in the vicinity for a week, and only then did his level rise up to 103. But now, his level had jumped past 120. This was all thanks to the giant-type monsters, each possessing a boss level worth of experience points, as well as the king of giants who gifted him with an enormous amount of experience points, which was as much as 8 levels worth, no less. Very nice. Jinwoo nodded his head. He had made the right call by killing the king. It was definitely not a coincidence that his level shot up by 8 in one go. This being was able to emit enough pressure to make breathing difficult for him even though its powers had been sealed away by these special chains. If this thing got freed and was allowed to roam freely in the outside world, then Jinwoo shook his head left to right. He should thank the lucky stars that he got to discover its true nature before that happened. So, it's those rulers that keep sending these things over here. Why did it happen? Back when he first heard the term rulers, a scene automatically began replaying itself in his mind. And it was about 4 angels descending from the heavens. Even though it hadn't really happened to him, Jinwoo felt a chill run down his backside simply from discovering them in the playback. He felt as if his heart fell to the pit of his stomach. Could those things be the rulers? If those things were planning to invade Earth, then he definitely lacked enough power to stop them as he was right now. He gripped the magic crystal even tighter. I need to get much stronger. The news of the giants all being hunted down quickly spread to the rest of the world. From the closest neighbor of Japan, South Korea, all the way to Brazil and South America, on the other side of the globe. The entire world heard of Jinwoo's feats. A single hunter rescues an entire nation. Various social media networking sites were in upheaval with suggestions of a brand new special authority rank hunter making his appearance. The difference this time, compared to the Jeju Island raid, was that such suggestions were being made not only by the Koreans, the state of Maryland, in the eastern half of the United States of America. The American hunters who had safely concluded the raid of the Rank S Gate were supposed to be heading to the celebratory party organized by the U.S. government. So this was where you were. The 3 men's heads snapped immediately in the direction of where that voice was coming from, and their eyes all widened as well. Thomas Andre stood before them and with a grin, presented them with a single slip of paper. What is this? The promissory note stating that all of you will uphold the result of the bet. Thomas Andre didn't really give a damn about the stunned reactions of the 3 hunters and began jotting down the items each of them had put forward in the bet. You said your yacht. You, your mansion. And you. Thomas Andre stared straight at the 3rd hunter and began scratching the side of his head with the end of his pen. What did you bet again? The singled-out hunter gulped down his saliva and hurriedly raised his voice. I didn't bet anything, actually. Hey, your tie looks pretty cool. No, I didn't. Your tie. No, wait, Thomas Andre lowered his sunglasses just a little and quietly stared at him, causing the hunter to shut his mouth. Because this guy had witnessed the power of Goliath capable of ripping rank S monsters apart with nothing but his bare hands. This hunter had not one bit of desire to go up against Thomas Andre, who waltzed around the rank S dungeon as if it was a low-ranked dungeon commonly found everywhere. Your tie. The hunter undid his tie with a tearful face. A short while later, Thomas Andre walked into the restaurant of the hotel while whistling to himself before discovering a familiar face there and stopped his leisurely stroll. It was the manager in charge of managing the top hunters of the Scavenger Guild, Laura. When she approached him, Thomas Andre showed off his new tie to her and asked, "So, what do you think about my new tie? It looks expensive, but it does not suit your Hawaiian shirt, sir." You think so? Thomas Andre undid the tie around his neck and chucked it inside a trash can nearby while replying nonchalantly to her. Yup, I thought as much. Laura had seen how Thomas Andre operated from a close vantage point for a very long time now. So, she didn't display much of a reaction and simply stated the reason why she was here. We have a problem. A problem? Thomas Andre raised his head away from the trash can. His experience told him that this problem couldn't have been a minor one since Laura didn't use the phone. but rather showed up here personally to inform him like this. What kind of a problem are we talking about here? Laura spoke with a worried voice. The list of guilds invited by the Hunter Bureau for this year's International Guild Conference has been published. However, it includes South Korea's Ajin Guild. Ajin Guild. Suddenly, he was overcome with an ominous feeling. Thomas Andre's voice sounded heavier as a result. Laura nodded her head. It's as you suspect. It's Hunter SungJinwoo's guild. As he thought, why did all the ill omens he sensed never miss their marks? Thomas Andre frowned deeply and spoke. So, I guess he's coming to America, then. As Jinwoo busied himself with killing the giants in Japan, one of them escaped out into the sea. The creature had been heading into the Pacific, but the news of it completely changing course towards China was a bit of fresh shock to the association president. Do-gun Huey quickly asked, how are the Chinese responding to this situation? We heard that Liu Zhaijin will personally step up, sir. By any chance, are you Hunter Nim? If you're looking for Hyung Nim, he's over. No. Yu Jinho blinked his eyes several times. Me? Yes. Yu Jinho utilized his meager English skills to reconfirm that it was indeed him the Japanese wanted, and quickly received a smartphone from the latter. And then, his expression gradually hardened as he listened to the call. Until the call came to an end, Yu Jinho simply repeated yes over and over again. I'm sorry, Hyung Nim. Looks like I'll have to go back to Korea right away. Seeing how serious Yu Jinho's expression was, Jinwoo couldn't help but ask, what happened? I'm not too sure myself. It's just that, I've been told there's been an emergency at home and I need to go back immediately. Jinwoo shut his mouth. He could think of a reason already. Chairman Yu's illness. If his suspicion proved to be correct, then it was understandable why the caller was unable to provide much clarification over the phone to Yu Jinho. How could anyone say to a son in another country that his father had fallen into a comatose state over a phone call? So, Jinwoo didn't inquire any further. Yu Jinho did his best to sound assured and relaxed in front of his Hyung Nim. But in reality, he could barely keep his worries in check. He could still recall his mom's voice on the phone. It was the first time that her warm and kind voice sounded so shaken like that. Just what had happened. His heart was pounding away madly right now. No, I should not think about anything for the time being. He had no idea what was going on, so if he kept worrying about it right now, it'd only make his thoughts more complicated. As a matter of fact, it could be nothing serious as well. Until he landed back on the Incheon International Airport, he continued to carry such a hopeful thought, however tiny, in his heart. Unfortunately for him, Yu Jinho gone. The moment he discovered the swollen eyes of Secretary Kim Ajusi coming to fetch him, he realized immediately that something really bad had happened. A car is waiting for you. For the time being, please come with me. What's going on? Yu Jinho so desperately wanted to ask that question. However, he was scared of the potential answer and couldn't mouth those 3 words. Please, hurry. Secretary Kim pointed at the outside of the airport. Jinho-gun, you need to stay strong in times like these. I shall explain everything on our way. Yu Jinho's tears welled up from those words. Secretary Kim explained Chairman Yu Myung-han's current condition to Yu Jinho as they rode on the car. But that couldn't be. Yu Jinho desperately tried to reject Secretary Kim's explanations. No, he didn't want to believe it. Unfortunately, after arriving in the hospital, he had no choice but to believe when he saw his sleeping father's face through the glass wall partition. He remained still as if he was dead. At the same time, it felt like something in his heart had shattered to pieces. Seeing his father, who looked so mighty and imposing, lying there on the hospital bed looking so wan and weak, something hard and powerful welled up from deep within. Dad, Yu Jinho tried to rush into the hospital room, but the doctors quickly blocked his way. The approach of a hunter who couldn't control his magic energy leakage would only worsen the patient's condition. Hearing that explanation from the doctors, Yu Jinho's expression became a person whose soul had abandoned him. So, that's how it was. He was a son who always disappointed his father, and now he couldn't even hold his father's hand for one last time, too. Faced with such a fitting end for himself, he couldn't even shed a tear anymore. I see. I've been a completely useless son, even till the end. Yu Jinho turned on his heels in dejection. But then, Secretary Kim approached him and handed over a black leather-bound case file. What is this? Yu Jinho weakly raised his head up after receiving this unknown file. Secretary Kim calmly explained himself. This is the item the chairman was working on before he collapsed. Actually, I've kept it with me in case he searched for it after waking up. But I thought that you might need it more than I do. Jinho-gun. This, you think so? Yu Jinho alternated his gaze between Secretary Kim and the file. Eventually, he cautiously opened it. It was a scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings. Every single page was packed full of articles from various newspapers containing either his older brother Yoo Jin-seong or his older sister Yoo Jin-hui. From father to son, Yoo Jin-ho wondered just from where he got this habit of cutting out and keeping the newspaper articles he liked. But it seemed that he got it from his father. To think he had this kind of a hobby. Even when stewing in sorrow, a grin still managed to squeak out as he looked at his brother and sister when they were young kids. Both of them were the pride of his father. In all sorts of academic competitions, talent contests, and concours, they were geniuses that made their names known throughout the country in their favorite subjects. It was rather obvious that this scrapbook would be filled with articles related to the two of them. As he flipped through the pages, Yoo Jin-ho grew more and more embarrassed by the fact that not a single photo of him could be found within. However, just as he flipped to the last page, his hands came to an abrupt stop. There were articles containing his name. Even those meaningless gossip pieces didn't escape his father's attention and found themselves cut out and pasted carefully within the page. No words wanted to come out of Yoo Jin-ho's mouth. While he stood there like that, a newspaper article that hadn't been fully cropped out fell to the floor. He hurriedly bent down to the floor and picked it up, only for the tears to stream down from his eyes. It was an article containing the photo of himself beaming brightly to the camera. That was taken when, after Jinwoo killed the boss-level giant monster, he refused all filming and interview requests from the countless reporters flooding into the location, so Yoo Jin-ho stepped up as the stand-in. Instead, Secretary Kim squeezed Yoo Jin-ho's shoulder and spoke. "It's not true that Chairman Yoo never loved you, Jin-ho-gun. As great as his love for you, he also held equally great expectations of you." Yoo Jin-ho wordlessly sat there, his shoulders shuddering uncontrollably as he cried. He somehow managed to calm his aching heart and stood back up. "Dad, for the time being, let me accompany you back to your home." "All right." Yoo Jin-ho left the hospital room of his father, Chairman Yoo, with Secretary Kim a little while later. But, just before the door to this special hospital room closed shut, a portion of the shadow beneath Yoo Jin-ho's feet separated away and slipped inside the room. No one witnessed this strange phenomenon happen. The door closed shut and the light within the room automatically switched off. And time continued to tick by like this. When the hour became late and no more people came around to visit this room, a shadow sneaked out from underneath Chairman Yoo's bed. Then, an ant soldier emerged from this shadow. He quietly looked around the room and discovered the sleeping Chairman Yoo. What sort of delicious open buffet was this? The ant soldier fixed his gaze on the Chairman Yoo and began drooling avariciously. But too bad for him. He got rapidly sucked into the shadow and was replaced by Jinwoo. That was the effect of the skill shadow exchange. That kid, why did have to he go and cry like that? Making me feel all bad and stuff. Jinwoo carefully raised the upper torso of Chairman Yoo Myung-han, opened his lips, and slowly poured in the divine water of life. Very slowly, and only a small amount at a time. However, Chairman Yoo must have known that this item was the sole lifeline capable of saving him, because he gulped the water down rather commendably well. Now that he thought about it, wasn't Yoo Jin-ho's birthday at the end of this month? I know it's a bit early, but well, happy birthday, Jin-ho. Skill information. Class-specific skill. Mana required to activate, none. The summoner can switch locations with the designated Shadow Soldier. Once activated, you must wait 2 hours of cooldown time before being able to use the skill again. The cooldown period will change according to the skill's level. Remaining cooldown time, 1 hours, 54 minutes and 11 seconds. Still 1 hour and 54 minutes left. Even if he disregarded the 11 seconds, he still had roughly 2 hours left to kill. He hadn't finished with the task of extracting shadows yet, meaning he still needed to go back to Japan one more time if he were to seek out the remaining dead giants and turn them into shadow soldiers. He did leave a shadow on standby there, so the issue of traveling back would be resolved as soon as Shadow Exchange's cooldown time had elapsed. But his current problem would be with how he'd go about spending the next 2 hours of waiting. Going home is out of the question. Even as he stepped out of the Seoul Ilsan Hospital's front entrance, Jinwoo continued to agonize over what he should next. But then, a rather nice idea popped up in his head. Okay, should I search for an ownerless dungeon or something? Jinwoo undid stealth and greatly extended out his sensory perception. His senses picked up 4 or 5 gates near his location. He pulled out his hunter-issued smartphone and accessed the association's app to confirm the details on those gates. Found you. Jinwoo found out that 2 of those gates weren't reported to the association yet. A meaningful smile formed on Jinwoo's face right away. "Miss, we've arrived." "Thank you, driver." Chairman Yoo Myung-han's eldest daughter, Yoo Jin-hui, was returning to the hospital after escorting her nearly fainted mother back home. She stepped